The cold wind sliced through the industrial park, carrying the faint hum of machinery and the sharp scent of diesel. Ethan Carter stood in the shadow of a towering warehouse, his worn hoodie and faded baseball cap blending him seamlessly into white. The chaos of Carter Logistics Eastside facility. To the workers rushing past with pallets and clipboards, he was just another new hire, another pair of hands to keep the conveyor belts moving. But Ethan was no ordinary worker. He was the CEO of Carter Logistics, a company he built from a single warehouse to a network of 6 distribution hubs over the past decade. Today, he was here undercover, driven by a nagging suspicion that something was deeply wrong. It had started with the report numbers that didn't add up. Shipments were meeting quotas, profits were steady, but complaints from a recently resigned employee had reached Ethan's desk. Whispers of overworked staff, ignored safety concerns, and a culture of fear. He could have sent a manager to investigate, but Ethan wasn't that kind of leader. Years ago, he'd been a warehouse worker himself, hauling boxes under supervisors who saw him as a number, not a person. That experience had fueled his ambition to create a company where people mattered. If his vision had been betrayed, he needed to see it with his own eyes. He adjusted his cap, pulling it low, and stepped closer to the loading dock. The warehouse buzzed with activity. Forklifts darted between stacks of crates, their engines groaning under the weight of overloaded pallets. Workers moved at a frantic pace, their faces etched with exhaustion. Ethan's boots crunched against the cracked concrete as he scanned the scene, his stomach tightening at the sight of pallets stacked so high they swayed with every gust of wind. This wasn't the company he'd envisioned. A sudden thud snapped his attention to the pavement just outside the loading bay. A delivery driver, a man in his late 40s with graying hair and a sweat-soaked uniform, staggered forward, his knees buckling. He clutched his chest, his breath coming in shallow gasps, before collapsing to the ground with a sickening crack. Ethan's heart lurched. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the man, his steel-toed boots pounding against the concrete. "Hey, you okay?" Ethan called, dropping to his knees beside the driver. The man's face was pale, his eyelids fluttering as he struggled to breathe. Ethan shook his shoulder gently. "Can you hear me? Stay with me." A few workers nearby paused, their eyes flicking to the fallen man before returning to their tasks. One of them, a wiry supervisor with a clipboard tucked under his arm, stepped forward. His name tag read Victor Hayes. He shook his head, his lips curling into a sneer. "Probably. Faking it," Victor muttered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. These drivers always pull stunts to get out of work. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he kept his focus on the driver. "Hey, hang in there," he said softly, checking the man's pulse. It was weak, erratic. "Someone call 911. Victor rolled his eyes, crossing his arms. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you are, but we don't need to make a big deal out of this. He's probably just dehydrated. Happens all the time." Ethan's blood boiled, but he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't here to blow his cover, not yet. "He's not faking," he said firmly, his voice low but sharp. "Call an ambulance." A younger worker, a lanky guy in his mid-20s with tired eyes and a name tag reading James Parker, hesitated before stepping forward. "I'll do it," he said, pulling out his phone with trembling fingers. Victor shot him a glare, but James ignored it, already dialing. Ethan turned back to the driver, whose breathing grew shallower. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep the man conscious. Mike Torres," the driver rasped, his voice barely audible. "Just need a second?" "You need more than a second," Ethan said, his tone gentle but resolute. "Help's coming. Stay with me, Mike." A small crowd of workers had gathered, their faces a mix of concern and unease. A woman in her 30s with a tight ponytail and a name tag reading Sarah Miller spoke up. "That's Mike. He delivers here a lot. Always looks beat, but no one asks." Why? Ethan's jaw tightened. That was going to change. He glanced at the workers, searching their faces. "Does anyone know if he's got a condition? Anything we should tell the paramedics?" No one answered. Most avoided his gaze. There, eyes darting to Victor, who stood with his arms crossed, clearly annoyed. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about Mike. There was a deeper problem here, a culture that silenced questions and punished compassion. The wail of sirens cut through the air, and within minutes, paramedics swarmed the scene. Ethan helped them load Mike onto a stretcher, his mind racing as the ambulance sped away. He turned to Victor, who hadn't moved an inch to help. "You didn't even try," Ethan said, his voice low and edged with anger. Victor scoffed, adjusting his clipboard. "We've got work to do. I can't drop everything for some driver who can't handle his job." Ethan's fists clenched, but he held back. He needed to see more, to understand how deep this rot went. "What's your name?" he asked the young worker who called 911. "James," the kid replied, shifting uncomfortably. "James Parker. You did the right thing, James. Thank you." Ethan nodded, then glanced at the warehouse behind them. The air was thick with the stench of oil and cardboard, and the hum of machinery never stopped. He could feel the weight of the workers' exhaustion, the tension that hung over them like a storm cloud. Something was wrong here, terribly wrong, and he was going to find out exactly what. Ethan kept his head down as he moved into the warehouse, blending in with the workers. He needed to see how things operated beyond that disturbing moment outside. A forklift whizzed past, its brakes squealing as it narrowly avoided a stack of crates that wobbled dangerously. No one batted an eye. Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't just negligence. It was a disaster waiting to happen. He joined a group of workers at a conveyor belt, where boxes moved in a relentless stream. Sarah Miller worked beside him, her movements quick but strained, her sleeves frayed from years of wear. Across from her, a grizzled worker in his 50s, Ben Cole, winced as he lifted a heavy box, his face etched with fatigue. Ethan grabbed the box, mimicking their pace, but the weight of it pulled at his back within minutes. No wonder these people looked broken. From an elevated platform, Victor's voice barked over the noise. "Move faster. We're behind on quota." His eyes darted between the workers, his foot tapping impatiently against the metal railing. Ethan noticed Sarah glance at the clock, her lips tightening. She muttered something under her breath, too quiet for Victor to hear. Ethan leaned closer to her. "You okay?" Sarah's eyes flicked to him, wary. "Just trying to keep up," she said, her voice clipped. "Don't talk too much. They'll notice." Ethan nodded, but his mind was racing. He'd built Carter Logistics to be a place where people could take pride in their work, where they felt valued. But what he saw now was a machine grinding its workers into dust. Victor was part of the problem, but Ethan suspected the issues ran deeper up to the managers who set the quotas, allocated the budgets, and turned a blind eye to complaints. As he stacked another box, Ethan's resolve hardened. He'd stay undercover a little longer, learn everything he could. But when the time came, everyone in this warehouse would know exactly who he was, and things were going to change. Ethan Carter slipped deeper into the heart of the Eastside warehouse, his boots scuffing against the gritty concrete floor. The air was thick with the smell of cardboard dust and engine oil, and the relentless clatter of conveyor belts filled his ears. Under the dim fluorescent lights, workers moved like cogs in a machine, their faces drawn, their movements mechanical. Ethan's hoodie clung to his sweat-dampened back as he joined them, blending in as just another pair of hands. But his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail: the wobbling stacks of pallets, the frayed straps on a forklift, the way workers flinched when Victor Hayes' voice cut through the noise. This was no longer the company Ethan had dreamed of building. He'd seen enough outside to know something was rotten. Mike Torres' collapse, Victor's callous dismissal, the workers' hesitation to help, it all pointed to a deeper sickness. But Ethan needed more than a snapshot. He needed to feel the weight of their days, to understand why his company had strayed so far from his vision. Years ago, as a young warehouse worker, he'd sworn he'd never let his people be treated as disposable. Now, he was here to uncover the truth. No matter how ugly, Ethan positioned himself at a conveyor belt near Sarah Miller, the woman who'd spoken up about Mike. Her hands moved quickly, stacking boxes with practiced precision. But her shoulders sagged, and her eyes flicked nervously toward the elevated platform where Victor loomed. Ethan grabbed the box, mimicking her pace, though the weight pulled at his muscles. The belt never slowed, a constant stream of packages demanding attention. He stole a glance at Sarah, noting the frayed cuffs of her uniform and the faint lines of worry etched into her face. "How long you been here?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice low. Sarah's eyes darted to him, wary. 5 years, she said curtly, tossing a box onto the belt. "You knew?" "Yeah," Ethan lied, adjusting his cap. "First day. Seems intense." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "You'll get used to it, or you won't." Her gaze flicked to Victor, who was barking at a worker struggling with a scanner. "Just keep your head down and don't miss quota." Ethan nodded, but his stomach churned. Quota. The word hung in the air like a guillotine. He'd approved efficiency metrics years ago, but they were meant to optimize operations, not crush people. Somewhere along the line, those numbers had become a whip. Across the belt, Ben Cole, the older worker Ethan had noticed earlier, grunted as he hefted a heavy crate. His face was weathered, his hands calloused, but there was a stiffness in his movements, a wince he couldn't hide. Ethan caught his eye. "You okay, man?" Ben shrugged, his voice gruff. "Been better. Been worse." He tossed the crate onto the belt, but his grip faltered, and the box hit the edge, teetering before settling. Victor's head snapped toward. "Them, Cole!" Victor shouted from the platform, his voice slicing through the din. "You break anything, it's coming out of your check. Move faster." Ben's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He grabbed another box, his hands trembling slightly. Ethan's fists clenched under the belt. He wanted to call Victor out, but he needed to stay invisible for now. The conveyor belt churned on, and Ethan fell into the rhythm, though his back ached within minutes. The pace was brutal, the boxes heavier than they looked, and the constant hum of machinery drowned out any chance of conversation. He glanced at James Parker, the young worker who'd called 911 for Mike. James worked a few feet away, his movements quick but imprecise, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Ethan noticed a small notebook tucked into James' back pocket, the edges worn, as if he carried it everywhere. "What's with the notebook?" Ethan asked when James paused to wipe sweat from his brow. James hesitated, glancing around before answering. "Just ideas. I want to learn the logistics, maybe move up someday. But there's no time to study when you're running like this." Ethan's chest tightened. He'd started Carter Logistics to be a place where people like James could grow, not grind themselves into the ground. "You shouldn't have to choose between work and a future," he said quietly. James gave a small, skeptical smile. "Tell that to the bosses." Before Ethan could respond, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. Heads turned toward the loading dock, where a towering stack of pallets had collapsed, scattering boxes across the floor. A young worker, Maria Lopez, stood frozen nearby, her face pale, her hand shaking. The pallets had been stacked far above regulation height, and one had grazed her arm as it fell, leaving a red scrape. Victor stormed over, his face twisted with anger. "What the hell, Lopez? You think we're made of money? That's thousands." "In damages," Maria stammered, her voice barely audible. I didn't touch it. It just fell. You expect me to believe that?" Victor snapped, stepping closer. "If it's damaged, you're paying for it." Ethan moved before he could stop himself, stepping between Maria and Victor. "Maybe if you didn't stack them so high, this wouldn't have happened," he said, his voice steady but sharp. Victor turned, eyeing him up and down. "Who the hell are you, new guy?" "Mind your business." Ethan held his gaze, his pulse pounding. "I'm just saying, this place is a mess. People are exhausted, and safety's an afterthought." Victor let out a sharp laugh. "You've been here what, an hour? And now you're an expert?" His eyes narrowed. "Keep your mouth shut and get back to work." Ethan's hands tightened around the box he was holding, but he forced himself to step back. He couldn't reveal himself yet, not until he had a fuller picture. Maria shot him a quick, grateful glance before returning to her task, her hands still trembling. As the shift dragged on, Ethan saw more cracks in the system. A forklift lurched past, its brakes squealing, nearly clipping a stack of crates. Workers ignored it, too focused on meeting quota to report the hazard. Sarah groaned softly, flexing her fingers, and Ethan noticed blisters forming on her hands. "Can we get a break soon?" she asked, her voice low. Victor, hovering nearby, rolled his eyes. "You get a break when I say so. Quit whining." Ethan's blood simmered. He glanced at Ben, who was rubbing his lower back, and James, who'd tucked his notebook away as if ashamed of his ambitions. The workers weren't just tired, they were breaking. And Victor wasn't the only problem. Ethan remembered the name Sarah had mentioned earlier, Claire Evans, the HR manager who supposedly handled complaints. If she'd ignored reports about safety and quotas, she was part of this too. At one point, Ethan caught Sarah glancing at her phone, her face tightening. She slipped it back into her pocket quickly, but not before Victor noticed. "Miller, you texting all my time?" he barked. "It's my kid," Sarah said, her voice defensive. "She's sick. I just needed to check. I don't care if it's the president," Victor cut in. "You're here to work, not play mommy. One more time, and you're written up." Sarah's face flushed, but she said nothing, returning to the belt. Ethan's stomach twisted. He wanted to intervene, but he needed to see more, needed to know how far this went. He leaned toward James, keeping his voice low. "This happen a lot?" James nodded, barely moving his lips. "All the time. You speak up, you get written up. Too many write-ups, you're gone." Ethan's mind flashed back to his own days as a worker, dodging supervisors who'd punish you for taking a sip of water. He vowed to be different, but here he was, watching his own company betray that promise. He moved to another station, helping Ben load heavier crates. The older man's hand shook slightly, and Ethan noticed a slight limp in his step. "Been doing this long?" Ethan asked. 20 years, Ben said, his voice rough. "Used to love it. Felt like I was part of something. Now, just try." To survive the shift, Ethan's heart sank. He wanted to tell Ben who he was, to promise things would change, but he held back. He needed evidence, names, numbers, proof of who was letting this happen. He thought of Claire Evans again, and another name James had mentioned. Tom Reynolds, the maintenance manager who ignored repair requests. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, and Ethan was determined to put it together. As the shift neared its end, Ethan overheard two workers whispering near a stack of crates. "Mike's been running double shifts for weeks," one said. "No wonder he collapsed." "He told me his wife's sick," the other replied. "Needs the money." "What's he supposed to do?" Ethan's resolve hardened. Mike Torres wasn't just a number on a delivery log. None of these people were. He built Carter Logistics to give workers like them a chance, not to grind them down. As he clocked down, blending into the weary stream of workers, Ethan knew he was running out of time to stay undercover. The warehouse was a pressure cooker, and it was only a matter of time before something or someone broke for good. The warehouse pulsed with a restless energy, the hum of machinery, a constant undercurrent to the workers' hurried movements. Ethan Carter's muscles ached from hours at the conveyor belt, his hands raw from lifting boxes, but his focus was razor sharp. Every detail he'd observed, the teetering pallets, the squealing forklifts, the fear in the workers' eyes, confirmed his worst suspicions about Carter Logistics Eastside facility. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was a betrayal of everything he'd built the company to be. Victor Hayes, the shift supervisor, stood at the center of it, his barked orders cutting through the din like a whip. But Ethan knew Victor wasn't the only problem. The rot went deeper, and he was running out of time to stay undercover. Ethan worked alongside Sarah Miller, whose quick, precise movements belied the exhaustion in her posture. James Parker, a few feet away, kept his head down, his notebook of logistics notes tucked away as if it were a guilty secret. Ben Cole, the veteran worker, grunted with every heavy lift, his limp more pronounced as the shift wore on. Maria Lopez, still shaken from the pallet collapse earlier, worked silently, her scraped arm hidden under a sleeve. Ethan's chest tightened. These were his people, and they were breaking under a system he'd failed to oversee. A sudden screech tore through the warehouse, louder than the usual clatter. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound. A forklift, its brakes whining, lurched to a stop just inches from a stack of crates. The driver, a wiry man in his 30s, cursed under his breath. As the load shifted, a box tumbling to the floor with a dull thud. The crates wobbled, threatening to collapse like the pallets had earlier. Workers froze, their eyes darting to the platform where Victor stood, his face darkening. What the hell was that? Victor bellowed, descending the metal stairs with a speed that made the workers flinch. He zeroed in on the forklift driver, whose name tag read Carlos. "You trying to wreck this place, Ruiz?" Carlos raised his hands, his voice unsteady. "The brakes, they're shot. I've reported it 3 times this month." "Reported it?" Victor sneered, stepping closer. "You think Batson?" "Excuse? That load's worth more than your paycheck. If it's damaged, you're done." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He'd seen enough Victor's bullying, the ignored maintenance, the unsafe conditions. His cover was a ticking clock, and this moment was pushing him to the edge. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "He's not the problem. That forklift is a hazard. You're lucky no one got hurt." Victor spun on him, his eyes narrowing. "You again, new guy? What's your deal? You think you run this place?" Ethan met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm saying this warehouse is a disaster waiting to happen. People are exhausted, equipment's falling apart, and you're more interested in blaming them than fixing anything." A tense silence settled over the warehouse. Workers slowed their movements, their eyes flicking between Ethan and Victor. Sarah's hands paused on a box, her breath catching. James glanced up, his expression a mix of fear and curiosity. Ben leaned against the conveyor belt, his weathered face unreadable. Maria's eyes widened, as if expecting Victor to lash out. Victor let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You've been here, what, a day? And you're telling me how to do my job? You don't know how things work here, buddy." Ethan took a step closer, his voice steady but laced with steel. "I know enough to see you're breaking people down instead of leading them. I know a man collapsed outside, and you called him a liar. I know this place is a mess, and you're making it worse." Victor's nostrils flared, his face reddening. "You're on thin ice, new guy. One more word, and you're out." Ethan's heart raced, but he felt a calm certainty settle over him. He'd seen everything he needed to see. The workers' fear, the unsafe conditions, the culture of intimidation, it all stopped now. He reached up, slowly pulling off his baseball cap. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath as he ran a hand through his dark, sweat-dampened hair, his eyes never leaving Victor's. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the silent floor. "My name is Ethan Carter. I own Carter Logistics." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah's mouth fell open, her hands dropping to her sides. James blinked, his notebook slipping from his pocket to the floor. Ben's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. Maria took a step back, her hand covering her mouth. Victor's face drained of color, his clipboard slipping slightly in his grip. You're lying," Victor stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "There's no way. There's every way," Ethan cut in, his tone sharp but controlled. "I've spent years building this company, and today I watched a man collapse outside while you stood there accusing him of faking it. I've seen workers pushed beyond their limits, safety ignored, and a supervisor more interested in intimidation than leadership." Victor's mouth opened, but no words came out. The workers stood frozen, the hum of the conveyor belt the only sound in the cavernous space. Ethan let the silence hang, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He saw fear, shock, and a glimmer of something else. Hope, maybe, buried deep. He turned back to Victor, his voice low and final. "You're done here, Victor. You're fired, effective." Immediately, a murmur ran through the workers. Victor's face twisted, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice rising. "You think firing me fixes this? These problems don't start with me." Ethan didn't blink. "No, but you've made them worse. And I won't have someone like you leading my people." Victor's jaw twitched, his hands clenching at his sides. For a moment, Ethan thought he might argue, but Victor let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Good luck, then. You'll need it." He turned on his heel, storming toward the exit, his boots echoing in the silence. The door slammed behind him, and the warehouse exhaled. Ethan turned to the workers. Their eyes locked on him, some wary, some stunned. He knew firing Victor was only the first step. The real work, fixing the system, rebuilding trust, would be harder. But he also knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. "I spent the day working alongside you," Ethan said, his voice steady but earnest. "I felt the weight of the boxes, the pace of the belt, the pressure of the quotas. I've seen how you're treated, and it's not what I built this company for. I take responsibility for letting it get this bad. But starting now, things change." Sarah crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "You mean that? Or is this just a show?" Ethan met her gaze. "I mean it, and I'll prove it. But I need to hear from you. What's really going on here? No consequences, just the truth." For a moment, no one spoke. Then James stepped forward, his voice hesitant but clear. "The quotas, they're impossible. They keep going up, but we don't get more people. If we fall behind, we get written up. Too many write-ups, and you're out." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sarah spoke next, her voice firm despite the tremor in it. "If we report anything safety issues, broken equipment, nothing happens. We're told to tough it out or leave." Ben shifted, his voice rough but steady. "I've seen people get hurt and keep working because they're scared to speak up. You're labeled a problem if you do." Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd expected problems, but this was worse, systemic, entrenched, a failure that reached far beyond Victor. He thought of Claire Evans, the HR manager, and Tom Reynolds, the maintenance head, names the workers had mentioned. They'd ignored reports, cut corners, and let this culture fester. But there was something bigger at play, quotas set by the board. budgets slashed for profit. Ethan had been too far removed, trusting others to carry out his vision. That ended. Today. I hear you, Ethan said, his voice carrying a quiet resolve. And I'm not leaving this alone. Starting today, we're going to fix this together. James tilted his head, his eyes searching Ethan's. You really think you can change things? After all this time? I do, Ethan said. And I'll start by being here, on the floor, until we get it right. Sarah's skepticism softened, just a fraction. Ben nodded slowly, as if testing the weight of Ethan's words. Maria's eyes shone with something close to hope. But Ethan knew words weren't enough. He'd fired Victor, but the real fight against a broken system against the board, against years of neglect, was just beginning. As the workers returned to their stations, the conveyor belts humming back to life, Ethan stayed on the floor, his mind racing. He needed to confront Claire and Tom, to dig into the budgets and quotas, to make good on his promise. But for now, he watched his people. Their movements a little less heavy, their glances a little less guarded. It was a start. The warehouse floor was quieter now, the conveyor belts humming at a subdued pace as the shift wound down. Ethan Carter stood among the workers, his cap back on, but his identity no longer a secret. The air still carried the weight of Victor Hayes. Exit, the echo of his slamming door lingering in the workers' cautious glances. Sarah Miller stacked boxes with her usual precision, but her eyes flicked toward Ethan, a mix of hope and skepticism in her expression. James Parker clutched his notebook, his posture less hunched, as if Ethan's promise of change had lightened his load just a fraction. Ben Cole, the veteran, leaned against a crate, his weathered face unreadable, but his eyes sharp, watching Ethan's every move. Maria Lopez worked silently, her scraped arm hidden, but she stole glances at him, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ethan's reveal had shaken the warehouse, but he knew firing Victor was just the first step. The real battle lay ahead, against a system that had let this place fester, against managers who'd ignored complaints, and against a board that prioritized profit over people. He'd seen the exhaustion in his workers, felt the ache of their labor in his own muscles, and heard their stories of fear and neglect. Now, he needed to confront those who'd let it happen under his watch. Ethan pulled out his phone, his fingers steady as he dialed Claire Evans, the HR manager whose name had surfaced in whispers. The line rang twice before her crisp voice answered. "This is Claire. Ethan Carter," he said, his tone clipped. "I need you at the Eastside warehouse tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. We have serious issues to discuss." A pause stretched across the line. "Is something wrong, Mr. Carter?" Claire's voice was measured, but Ethan caught a hint of unease. "Everything's wrong," he said. "Employee mistreatment, ignored safety reports, impossible quotas. I've seen it myself. Be here." Another pause. "I'll be there," she said, her tone neutral, and the call ended. Ethan's next call was to Tom Reynolds, the maintenance manager. The phone barely rang once before Tom's gruff voice answered. "Reynolds, Ethan Carter. Why are maintenance requests being ignored? I almost got hit by a forklift with faulty brakes today. Workers have reported issues for months." Longer silence this time. "I wasn't aware it was that serious, sir," Tom said, his voice faltering. "We're working within budget constraints. Repairs take time." Ethan's patience was paper thin. "Time's up. I want every piece of equipment inspected by next week. If it's not fixed, you're out of a job. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Tom muttered, and Ethan hung up, his jaw tight. Budget constraints. He'd allocated funds for maintenance years ago. Someone somewhere had decided to cut corners. He turned back to the warehouse floor, where the workers were clocking out, their movements slow and weary. Ethan approached Sarah, James, Ben, and Maria, who lingered near the conveyor belt. "I need to know everything," he said, his voice low, but firm, no filters. "If I don't understand what's wrong, I can't fix it." James hesitated, glancing at the others. "It's not just Victor," he said finally. "The quotas come from corporate. They keep going up, but we don't get more staff. If we fall behind, we're written up. Too many, and you're gone." Sarah crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "And if you report anything broken equipment, safety issues, it gets buried. I reported a loose railing last month. Nothing happened." Ben nodded, his voice rough. "I've seen people get hurt and keep quiet. You report an injury, you're labeled a liability. Next thing you know, your hours are cut." Maria spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't report my scrape today because I can't afford to lose shifts. My brother's in college. I'm helping him pay tuition." Ethan's stomach twisted. These were the stories he'd missed, sitting in his corner office, trusting others to uphold his vision. "Who handles these reports?" he asked. "Maintenance goes to Tom Reynolds," James said. "But good luck getting a response. Scheduling and write-ups? That's Brenda Walsh, operations coordinator. If she doesn't like you, you get the worst shifts. And HR?" Ethan pressed, thinking of Claire. Sarah snorted. "Claire Evans. She's supposed to handle complaints, but nothing changes. She just tells us to manage or be a team player." Ethan's jaw tensed. Claire, Tom, Brenda names that kept coming up, links in a chain of neglect. But he suspected the chain stretched higher, to the board that set the quotas and approved the budgets. He needed to confront Claire and Tom directly, but first, he wanted to hear more from the workers. "Let's go to the office," Ethan said, gesturing toward the cluttered room at the back of the warehouse. The group exchanged wary glances, but followed, their footsteps echoing in the now quiet space. Inside, the office was a mess piles of paperwork, a flickering computer monitor, a half-empty coffee cup. This was where Victor had ruled, where decisions had been made that crushed the workers' spirits. Ethan didn't sit. He leaned against the desk, facing the group. "Tell me what else is wrong. I need the full picture." Ben spoke first, his voice heavy. "The equipment's a nightmare. That forklift Carlos was driving? Brakes have been bad for months. We've reported it, but Tom says there's no budget." Sarah added, "Scheduling's a punishment system. Brenda decides who gets what shifts. If you speak up or miss quota, you're stuck on nights or weekends. I've missed my daughter's school events because of it." James shifted uncomfortably. "And the write-ups, they come out of nowhere. You're told you're not a good fit if you question anything. A lot of guys just quit before it gets worse." Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw someone get hurt last year. Crate fell, sprained his wrist. He didn't report it because he was afraid of losing his job. I'm scared it'll happen to me." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. This was worse than he'd imagined. A culture of fear, enabled by managers who turned a blind eye. He pulled out his phone, typing notes. Tom maintenance failures. Brenda scheduling abuses. Claire ignored complaints. He looked up at the group. "This stops today. Retaliation, ignored reports, impossible quotas. It's over. If anyone tries to punish you for speaking up, you come to me." Sarah arched a brow. "And what about the higher-ups? They're the ones setting these quotas. You think they'll let you change things?" Ethan met her gaze. "They won't have a choice." "I'm not backing down." A sharp ping interrupted them. Ethan glanced at his phone, an email from the board. Of directors marked urgent. Subject: Eastside Warehouse Operations. He opened it, his eyes scanning the text. "Mr. Carter, we've been informed of your decision to terminate a supervisor and disrupt operations. This will impact quarterly projections. We request an immediate explanation." Ethan's jaw tightened. The board. Of course, they'd push back. Profit margins were their god, and Ethan's actions, firing Victor, threatening to halt the warehouse, were a direct challenge. He pocketed his phone, his resolve hardening. "I'll deal with them," he said, more to himself than the group. Ben tilted his head, his voice cautious. "You're serious about this? Because we've heard promises before." "I'm serious," Ethan said. "I've been out of touch too long. That's on me. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until this place is what it should be." The group exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of hope and doubt. James spoke up, his voice tentative. "What's next, then?" "Firing Victor doesn't fix the equipment or the quotas." Ethan nodded. "Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Claire and Tom. We're reviewing every maintenance request, every schedule, every write-up. And I'm shutting this warehouse down for a full safety audit. No shipments until it's safe." Sarah let out a low whistle. "That's not going to sit well with corporate." "I don't care," Ethan said, his voice firm. "This isn't about numbers anymore. It's about you." Maria's eyes softened, but Sarah's remained guarded. "If you follow through, maybe we'll believe you," she said. "But we've been burned before." Ethan respected her skepticism. Trust wasn't owed, it was earned. "Then hold me accountable," he said. "If I slip, call me out." As the group dispersed, Ethan stayed in the office, the weight of their words settling over him. He thought of Mike Torres, still in the hospital, and the countless others who'd suffered in silence. Claire and Tom were just the start. The board's email was a warning shot, and Brenda Walsh's name lingered in his mind. He'd built Carter Logistics to be a place of opportunity, but somewhere along the line, it had become a machine that chewed up its people. That ended now. Ethan stepped back onto the warehouse floor, the lights dimming as the last workers clocked out. He'd confront Claire and Tom tomorrow, but he knew the real fight was with the system itself. The quotas, the budgets, the board's obsession with profit. As he walked through the empty warehouse, the hum of machinery finally silent, Ethan felt the weight of his responsibility. He'd failed these people once. He wouldn't do it again. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Eastside warehouse, its concrete facade as unyielding as the challenges Ethan Carter now faced. The hum of machinery was absent, replaced by an eerie stillness as workers gathered near the loading dock, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Ethan stood before them, his hoodie and cap replaced by a crisp button-down shirt, but his resolve unchanged. Firing Victor Hayes had been a spark. Confronting Claire Evans and Tom Reynolds had lit the fuse. Now, Ethan was determined to ignite. Real change, but he knew it wouldn't come without resistance from the board, from managers, and even from the workers he was trying to help. The previous night had been sleepless. Ethan had pored over maintenance logs, scheduling records, and emails from the board, each document revealing a deeper layer of neglect. Budgets for equipment repairs had been slashed, redirected to efficiency initiatives that pushed workers harder. Claire's report showed complaints filed by Sarah Miller and others, marked as resolved without action. Brenda Walsh's scheduling notes revealed a pattern of punishing shifts for those who spoke up. And the board's email, cold and demanding, loomed over it all. "Your actions threaten our quarterly projections. Explain yourself at the next meeting." Ethan's jaw tightened at the memory. He'd explain, all right, by showing them a company that valued its people over profit. He turned to the workers, who stood in loose clusters, their eyes on him. Sarah crossed her arms, her skepticism a silent challenge. James clutched his notebook, his expression cautious but hopeful. Ben leaned against a crate, his limp more pronounced after yesterday's grueling shift. Maria stood at the edge, her scraped arm bandaged but visible. Ethan took a breath, his voice carrying across the quiet lot. "Starting today, This warehouse is shut down for a full safety audit, he said. No shipments, no quotas, until every piece of equipment is checked and every hazard is fixed. I've hired a team of technicians to start this morning. We're also reviewing quotas and schedules to make sure they're fair. And if anyone tries to retaliate for speaking up, they answer to me. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're serious about stopping production? That's a big hit to the bottom line. I don't care about the bottom line right now, Ethan said, his tone firm. I care about you. This place should be safe, and it should be fair. I've let it slide too long. Ben shifted, his voice gruff. Sounds good, but what about the board? They're not gonna like this. Ethan met his gaze. They don't. Get a vote on this. I'm the CEO, and I'm making it right. James stepped forward, his voice tentative. And the quotas, they're killing us. We need more people, not just promises. Ethan nodded. We're hiring to fill the gaps. I've already started the process. And quotas are being reevaluated. They'll be realistic, not impossible. Maria's voice was soft, almost a whisper. What about people like Mike? He was working himself to death. Will that change? Ethan's chest tightened at the mention of Mike Torres, the driver who'd collapsed. I'm heading to the hospital to check on him today, he said. And I promise you, no one will have to push themselves like that again. The workers exchanged glances, some nodding, others still wary. Ethan knew trust was a long road, but he was committed to walking it. As the technicians arrived, their toolkits clanging, Ethan gestured toward the warehouse. Let's get to work. If you see anything unsafe, tell me or the techs. No consequences. As the workers dispersed, Ethan headed to his car, his mind on Mike. He drove to St. Mary's Hospital, the weight of the day pressing on him. Inside, the sterile hall smelled of antiseptic, and the beeping of monitors filled the air. Ethan found Mike's room, where the driver lay propped up in bed, and 4 in his arm. His face was still pale, but his eyes were clearer, and he managed a weak smile as Ethan entered. Mr. Carter? Mike said, his voice hoarse. They told me you called the ambulance. Ethan pulled up a chair, his expression soft but serious. Just Ethan. How are you feeling? Better, Mike said. Doc says it was exhaustion, dehydration. Stress. Been running double shifts for months. Ethan's stomach twisted. Why didn't you stop? Tell someone? Mike's smile faded. My wife's sick. Cancer. Treatments cost more than I make. I couldn't afford to slow down. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. You shouldn't have to choose between your health and your family. I'm covering your medical bills, Mike, and when you're ready to come back, you'll have a schedule that doesn't break you. Mike's eyes widened, glistening. You don't have to. I do. Ethan cut in. This is my company, and I let this happen. It's on me to fix it. Mike nodded slowly, his voice thick. Thank you. Ethan left the hospital with a renewed sense of urgency. Mike's story wasn't unique. Every worker in that warehouse had their own burdens, their own reasons to keep pushing through the pain. He returned to the warehouse, where the safety audit was underway. Technicians crawled over forklifts, testing brakes and hydraulics, while others inspected pallet racks and conveyor belts. Ethan joined them, clipboard in hand, noting every issue. Frayed cables, loose bolts, brakes that screeched like BANSHE. Sarah approached, her expression less guarded than before. They're actually fixing things, she said, nodding toward. A technician welding a railing. Never thought I'd see it. It's just the start, Ethan said. I need you and James to help oversee things for now, at least until we hire new supervisors. Sarah blinked. Me? Why? Because you know this place, Ethan said. And you're not afraid to speak up. James, too. He's got ideas. Ambition. I want you both to be part of this. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but don't expect me to trust you overnight. Ethan smiled faintly. Fair enough. He found James near the conveyor belt, scribbling in his notebook. James, I want you to work with Sarah. Help the techs, keep an eye on things. You're good at seeing the big picture. James's eyes widened. Me? You're not just anything, Ethan said. You've got potential. Use it. James nodded, a flicker of pride in his expression. But not everyone was on board. Greg Turner, a wiry supervisor who'd stayed quiet during Victor's firing, approached Ethan, his voice low. You're stirring things up, Carter. Some folks think you're just gonna make things worse, cut hours, bring in new rules that don't stick. Ethan studied Greg, noting the caution in his eyes. You one of them? Greg shrugged. I've been here 10 years. Seen bosses make promises and leave us hanging. I tried to push for better training, more staff, but Brenda shut me down. Said we had to maximize productivity with what we've got. Ethan's jaw tightened. Another name, Brenda Walsh. You want to be part of fixing this, Greg? Or you want to keep things the way they are? Greg met his gaze, his expression conflicted. I want better. But it's not just you against Brenda or Claire. It's the whole system. I know, Ethan said, and I'm taking it on. As the day wore on, Ethan worked alongside the technicians, his hands dirty from inspecting equipment. He noticed small changes, workers taking breaks without fear, Maria reporting a loose bolt without hesitation, men moving with less pain after a proper rest. But he also saw the skepticism in their eyes, the fear that this was temporary. His phone buzzed with another email from the board. Your audit is delaying shipments. We expect a full report by tomorrow. Ethan ignored it. The board could wait. By evening, the warehouse felt different, less oppressive, though the tension lingered. Ethan gathered Sarah, James, and Greg near the loading dock. This isn't an overnight fix, he said. But we're starting. Retaliation stops now. Breaks are mandatory. And if anyone, Brenda, Claire, or the board, tries to push back, they deal with me. Sarah crossed her arms, her voice softer but still sharp. You keep this up, you might actually change things. But we're watching, Ethan nodded. Good, hold me to it. As the workers left, Ethan stayed behind, watching the technicians pack up. He thought of Mike, Sarah's daughter, James's dreams, Maria's brother, Ben's years of loyalty. These were the people he'd failed, and the people he'd fight for. Claire and Tom were due tomorrow, and Brenda's name loomed large. The board's pressure was mounting, but Ethan was ready. He'd built Carter Logistics from nothing, and he'd rebuild it into something his people could be proud of. The Eastside warehouse stood silent under the early morning light, its usual clamor replaced by the murmur of voices gathered in the open lot. Ethan Carter stood on a makeshift platform of stacked crates, facing a sea of workers from all six. Carter Logistics warehouses. Word of his actions: firing Victor Hayes, halting operations for a safety audit, confronting managers had spread, drawing employees from across the company. Some stood with arms crossed, their faces etched with skepticism. Others leaned forward, eyes bright with cautious hope. Sarah Miller stood near the front, her expression softer but still guarded. James Parker clutched his notebook, his posture straighter, as if his ambitions felt within reach. Ben Cole, the veteran, leaned on a cane he hadn't used before, his weathered face showing a flicker of pride. Maria Lopez stood beside him, her bandaged arm a reminder of the risks they'd all faced. Ethan's heart pounded, but his voice was steady. He'd spent the past week on the warehouse floor, working alongside technicians, reviewing schedules, and digging into the systemic failures that had betrayed his people. The safety audit had uncovered a litany of issues: faulty forklifts, unstable pallet racks, and electrical hazards, all ignored to meet quotas. His meetings with Claire Evans and Tom Reynolds had been tense, Claire defensive, Tom evasive, but both had agreed to implement changes under Ethan's watchful eye. Brenda Walsh, the operations coordinator, was on notice, her scheduling practices under review, but the board's pressure loomed largest, their latest email a thinly veiled threat. Your disruptions are unacceptable. Attend the board meeting tomorrow to justify your actions. Ethan knew this gathering was his last chance to set the tone before facing them. Thank you for being here, Ethan began, his voice carrying across the lot. I've seen what you've been through: impossible quotas, broken equipment, a culture that punished you for speaking up. I built Carter Logistics to be a place where people could thrive, but I failed you. I let managers like Victor Hayes and systems that put profit over people take over. That ends now. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Sarah raised an eyebrow, her voice cutting through. You've said that before. What's different this time? Ethan met her gaze. What's different is I'm not leaving. I'm here, on the floor, until we get this right. We've started with the Eastside warehouse fixed forklifts, new. Safety protocols, mandatory breaks. We're hiring more staff to ease the load. Quotas are being reset to what's humanly possible, not what's profitable. And I'm setting up a worker council, led by people like you, to hold us accountable. James stepped forward, his voice tentative but clear. A council? You mean we'd have a say? Exactly, Ethan said. You know this place better than anyone. Sarah, James, Ben, Maria, you've already shown me what's wrong. I want you to help fix it. Ben nodded slowly, his cane tapping the ground. Sounds good, but the board's not gonna like it. They've been squeezing us for years. Ethan's jaw tightened. The board answers to me. If they want to fight, they'll lose. This company is nothing without you. A few workers clapped. Others exchanged glances. Maria spoke up, her voice stronger now. What about people who got hurt? Or people like Mike Torres working themselves sick? Ethan's mind flashed to his hospital visit with Mike, the driver whose collapse had sparked this reckoning. Mike's recovering, he said. His medical bills are covered, and he'll have a fair schedule when he returns. No one will be pushed to breaking again. If you're injured, you report it. If you're overworked, you tell me. No retaliation. No excuses. Greg Turner, the supervisor who'd been cautious but cooperative, spoke next. I've been trying to get better. Training for years. Brenda shot it down, said we didn't have the budget. You gonna stand by this? Ethan nodded. Training starts next month, and Brenda's being investigated. If she's been punishing people through scheduling, she's out. The crowd stirred, a mix of surprise and approval. Claire Evans, standing at the edge, shifted uncomfortably. Ethan had forced her to attend, and her presence sent a message. No one was above accountability. Tom Reynolds was there too, his face grim as technicians continued repairs behind him. Ethan knew Claire and Tom weren't fully on board, but they'd comply or face the consequences. I'm not promising perfection, Ethan continued. This is a big company, and change takes time. But I'm promising you my word. If something's wrong, tell me. If I fail you, call me out. This is your company as much as it's mine. Sarah crossed her arms, a faint smile breaking through. You keep showing up like this, Carter. I might actually believe you. A few workers laughed, the tension easing. James opened his notebook, scribbling something, his eyes bright with possibility. Ben adjusted his cane, his expression softer, as if he saw a glimpse of the company he'd once loved. Maria nodded, her hand brushing her bandaged arm, a spark of trust in her eyes. Ethan stepped down from the crates, joining the workers on the ground. I'm here today, and I'll be here tomorrow. Let's rebuild this together. As the crowd dispersed, some workers lingered, approaching Ethan with questions or concerns. A woman in her 50s shared her struggle to afford childcare. A young man mentioned a broken scanner that hadn't been fixed in months. Ethan listened, taking notes, his resolve deepening. The warehouse wasn't fixed, but it was breathing again, its pulse stronger than before. Later that day, Ethan walked the floor, watching his workers to brakes without fear as technicians tested a newly repaired forklift. Sarah and James coordinated with the audit team, their voices carrying a new authority. Greg approached, his expression less guarded. "I didn't think you'd stick around," he said. "Most bosses don't. I'm not most bosses," Ethan replied. "You're in for the long haul," Greg nodded. "Yeah, let's make this place better." As the sun set, Ethan's phone buzzed with another email from the board. "Your presence is required at headquarters tomorrow. Be prepared to defend your decisions." Ethan pocketed the phone, his eyes on the warehouse. The board could wait. His people COULDN single quotes T. Ethan Carter's journey in this story is a powerful reminder of the importance of empathy and leadership. His decision to go undercover, to feel the weight of his workers' struggles, reveals a truth too often ignored. A company's success is built on the well-being of its people. The story exposes the cost of toxic workplace culture's exhaustion, fear, and neglect, and shows that change begins with accountability. Ethan's failures as a distant CEO mirror the real-world disconnect many leaders have with their teams, but his commitment to listen, act, and stand against systemic pressures offers a model for transformation. The lessons here are clear. Leadership isn't about power. It's about responsibility. Workers like Sarah, James, Ben, and Maria remind us that every employee has a story, a struggle, and a dream worth valuing. Mike Torres' collapse underscores the human toll of prioritizing profit over people. And Ethan's fight against the board shows that real change often requires courage to challenge entrenched systems. These are lessons for all of us, whether you're a leader, a worker, or someone striving for a better world. Empathy, accountability, and action can rebuild what's broken. For more stories that inspire, challenge, and celebrate the human spirit, subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube. Join us to explore narratives that remind us what it means to lead, to struggle, and to rise together. Click the link, hit subscribe, and be part of the journey for stories that matter.